All right, let's talk about education. You know all the usual debates, right? Funding, test scores, the endless curriculum wars. But what if all of that, all that noise, is just a symptom of something way, way deeper? Today, we're going to dig into a really powerful argument that says the real crisis in education isn't about how we teach. Nope. It's about a total breakdown in our shared understanding of what's even real. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at this idea of a crisis beneath the crisis. Then, we'll bring in 4 key thinkers who each saw a piece of the puzzle. Next up is the really cool part, a unifying idea, an ontological triad that ties it all together. From there, we'll see how this collapse leads from big ideas, metaphysics, straight to management and bureaucracy. And finally, we'll ask, what's the path to restoration? Let's jump in. So, Section 1, a crisis beneath the crisis. And this is all about why those everyday complaints about education, they kind of miss the point. You know, we're always hearing about falling standards, the culture wars playing out in the classroom, or how students aren't ready for the job market. And look, those things might be real issues, but the argument here is that they're just smoke. They're not the fire. So that brings us to the big question, right? What is the real crisis here? The source we're looking at, from Jamie Thornberry, suggests we think about it like a doctor. You don't just put a Band-Aid on every little cut and scrape. You look for the underlying disease. So what's the root cause of all these problems in education? What's the one thing that, if we could just get it right, might start to fix everything else?
And here it is, the central diagnosis. The problem isn't methodological, it's ontological. Let that sink in. It means the crisis isn't about our teaching methods, like project-based learning versus direct instruction. No, it's about our fundamental beliefs about reality itself, about being. We've basically lost the plot. We no longer have a shared story about what's true, what's good, or, and this is the big one, what a human life is even for.
Okay, on to our next section. 4 thinkers, 4 fragments. So, to really get a grip on this ontological crisis, the source brings together 4 major thinkers. And what's interesting is that they were all pointing to different aspects of the same problem, but their critiques have mostly been treated as separate issues. You can think of them like 4 fragments of a broken mirror, or 4 puzzle pieces just waiting for someone to put them together.
First up, puzzle piece number 1 comes from the philosopher Alasdair MacIntyre. Now, he noticed something really weird about the way we talk about morality. He said our moral language has been completely severed from its historical and philosophical roots. It's like it's floating in space. So now when we say something is wrong or right, it often doesn't mean much more than I don't like this or I like this. He called this emotivism, morality reduced to just feelings.
Okay, piece number 2 comes from the great writer and farmer Wendell Berry, and his critique is probably one you felt yourself. He just slams this idea that education's main job is to be a career pipeline, that its whole purpose is to churn out workers for the economy. He saw this as a huge reduction, treating education as just an instrument, a tool, to produce, cogs in a machine, instead of forming whole, flourishing human beings. Our third fragment comes from thinkers like Martin Buber and Luigi Giussani. They really zeroed in on the idea that learning has to be relational. It's not just about downloading facts into your brain, right? It's about a genuine encounter with reality, with the subject matter, with your teacher, with each other. But here's the catch. While they were brilliant at describing that this is true, they didn't always provide the deep-down philosophical reason for why it's possible. And the final piece of the puzzle is the great books tradition. The idea that a healthy civilization depends on having a shared conversation about the big questions of life. Truth, justice, beauty. It's an amazing idea. But the critique here is that it often gets bogged down in the method. The Socratic seminars, the specific list of texts, without always defending the foundational belief that there's actually a real, discoverable truth that we're all looking for. All right, so now we have our 4 fragments on the table. 4 powerful critiques that seem kind of separate, so what's the connection? Well, this brings us to the core of the argument, a unifying framework, a kind of master key that unlocks how all these pieces fit together. And it's this ontological triad, love, light, and life. Let's break that down, starting with light. What does that mean? Well, light stands for the idea that reality itself makes sense, that it's intelligible. It has a built-in meaning and structure that we can actually discover. This is a huge claim. It means that truth isn't something our minds just cook up or construct. It's something that's already out there, waiting to be received, to be disclosed to us. Next up, we have life. And this isn't just about being biologically alive. This is about telos. It's a Greek word, and it just means purpose, or an end goal. It's the idea that everything in existence, especially a human person, has a built-in purpose,
a direction it's pointed in. So, from this perspective, education isn't just about cramming heads with facts. It's about guiding a person towards their proper end, towards fulfillment, wisdom, and genuine human flourishing. And finally, we have love. And this is really important. In this framework, love is not just a mushy feeling. It's way bigger than that. It's presented as the ontological ground of relation itself. Think of it as the fundamental gravity of the universe, the basic pull towards unity and connection that makes any genuine relationship, any community, and even the very act of knowing something possible at all.
Okay, so now we get to the big reveal, the aha moment. This is where we connect the collapse. Once you have this love, light, life triad in your mind, you can look back at those 4 fragments, those 4 critiques, and they suddenly just click into place. You start to see how each of those separate problems is really just a symptom of the collapse of this deeper, unified understanding of reality.
And here it is, laid out plain and simple. This is the synthesis. Let's just walk through it together. You see, when a culture loses its grip on light, the idea of objective, discoverable truth, well, you get exactly what MacIntyre was talking about. Moral language becomes meaningless. When you lose life, that sense of telos or purpose, education just defaults to what Wendell Berry warned us about. It becomes an instrumental career pipeline. And when you reduce love to just a personal feeling instead of the ground of reality, you get that relational breakdown that Buber and Giussani saw. And the great books, folks, they're basically just the canaries in the coal mine sensing the collapse at the whole darn thing.
So this leads to a really crucial question. What happens when a society and its educational system just ditches this whole metaphysical picture? You might think the result is, freedom, neutrality, everybody gets to decide for themselves. But the argument here is, not so fast. Order doesn't just vanish into thin air. It just goes underground. It becomes hidden.
Yeah, order does not disappear when it is denied. It becomes implicit. This is such a critical point. When you get rid of an explicit framework for what is good and true, you don't end up with a neutral, empty space. You get a vacuum that's immediately filled by a hidden order. And in many ways, this new implicit order is way more controlling, precisely because it never has to announce itself or defend its assumptions.
And this slide just lays out that shift perfectly. On one side, you have an education with a telos, a purpose. Its goal is formation, wisdom, flourishing. But without that purpose, the goal shifts. Formation becomes optimization. Wisdom is replaced by raw function. And flourishing, forget about it. It's replaced by whatever we can measure, by metrics.
So what does this hidden control actually look like? Well, it's all around us. It's the bureaucratic standardization, the technocratic obsession with assessment. It's when administrative committees have more say over the curriculum than the actual professors. Think about those university mission statements, right? They're always full of these empty buzzwords like innovation and excellence, but there's no real vision of what a good human life is. It's a system of control through paperwork, rubrics, and processes that manages the whole educational enterprise without ever having to say what it's all for. It is quite literally power without a face.
Okay, so that brings us to the final and maybe most important part. If all of this is true, what on earth do we do about it? If tweaking this system with minor reforms is just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, what's the real path forward? Well, the answer proposed here isn't another new method. It's not about more money. It's a call for a deep, foundational restoration of meaning.
Yeah, recovery can't come from just reform. It needs restoration. You just can't keep treating the symptoms and expect the disease to go away. The only real path forward, according to this argument, is to consciously and intentionally reestablish that ontological triad, that deep-down belief in a reality that is grounded in love, that is noble through light, and that is purposefully ordered toward life. That has to become the very foundation of our schools and universities once again.
And listen to this, because it totally flips our modern idea of freedom on its head. Ordered liberty in education is not constraint, but alignment with reality. So get this, true freedom isn't the absence of all rules. It's not just doing whatever you feel like. No, real freedom, real liberation, comes from aligning yourself, your learning, and your entire life with the way things actually are. And so, all of this leaves us with one last, pretty heavy question to chew on. In a world that seems more and more determined to treat education as just a system for processing data and producing efficient workers, what happens to an institution when it forgets what a human being even is? Can an educational system that's all about function and metrics but is completely empty of love, light, and life, can it really survive without a soul?